This is Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley, a podcast that explores the feelings, emotions, and experiences of what it means to be human in this world. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant to replace therapeutic services of any kind. Please refer to the list of references if you need support.
And before you dive in, please like, subscribe, comment, share with anyone you think might also connect with today's session. Our goal is to reach as many people as possible, and we are endlessly grateful for your continued support. So, let's get to it.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley. I am Sara Cate.
And I'm Ashley.
Ashley, my darling.
Oh.
Speaking of our topic of today, darling love of mine.
Oh,
what are we going to discuss today?
We're going to talk about intimacy.
Whoa. I mean, that's what I think intimacy sounds like. Oh.
Sara Cate needs.
I need a soundboard. I just really, any of you
made of just her sounds. That would be lovely.
Sounds on the soundboard, so then you can just play them.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
what does that mean?
Well, let's talk about what just happened, right? Like I said the word intimacy and you came up with this very specific sound. And that's what happens out, in the world. We say intimacy and people automatically go to oftentimes a sexual experience.
Sex. Yeah.
And sexual activity can be intimate, but sexual activity can also not be intimate. And that's a big distinction. Just because you're having sex with somebody doesn't mean that you're necessarily intimate with that person. And that's okay also if that's the situation that both parties are agreeing
consensual.
But intimacy is, I like to think of it as, I don't know actually what like the specific definition is. There's probably millions, but like it's a closeness and a comfortability with somebody where you feel like your authentic self is welcome. And that other person that you are in an intimate relationship with is able to see you for who you are, and you are able to see them for who they are, and you both are participating equally involved in the relationship. So you can have an intimate relationship with a romantic partner.
Yep.
You can also have a romantic partner who you are not intimate with at all. And you can have an intimate relationship. I would say that Sara Cate and I have a very intimate relationship. And she's my friend. She is and also my therapist.
And soulmate.
And yes, we just.
Yeah.
You can have
multi-layered.
Yeah. You can have very intimate relationships with family members, and some family members you don't, right? So like intimacy goes beyond sex, and oftentimes sex is not intimate at all.
I appreciate you making that distinction. Ashley has a really incredible, if you ever need to have conversations about sex, Ashley is your girl in the sense of our relationship to sex and our understanding of sex, especially in correlation to our bodies and bodily autonomy. But making that distinction, I think, of like, or separating this sense that intimacy has to mean a sexual relationship or experience, and that the closeness and the connection becomes kind of the priority, and also acknowledging and honoring that you don't have to always have an intimate connection in sex as long as it's consensual, right? Like also debunking that as like, this is the ultimate goal all of the time, right? And trying to kind of remove some of the shame around the way in which we get to choose to use our bodies. And how we listen to our bodies and what we want. So recognizing that, but I think the closeness is I love that you kind of use that as the launching point of what intimacy means, because that closeness and that connection, like we were talking about our relationship where it's like really layered. Like there
Mhm.
is this therapeutic relationship, both on both sides there was and like is. And not actually, right? I'm not actually her therapist anymore, but like, there is this layer of like deeply being known by the
Mhm.
other, right? And like really being seen by the other. And that developed over time and through trust. You know, we had a working relationship with each other at the beginning. And so my body learned to trust Ashley through time and safety and connection. And, you know, it took a while. And yet there was an emotional closeness very quickly. We like understood each other and we like clicked. You know, you have those people that you're just like, you get their jokes, right? You have the same sense of humor with them, which we did. Or you
Which
have
means that we are hilarious.
actually, and I not get no less than one or two texts every quarter about how funny we are when she is uploading our, and I just adore it because it's true. And some people don't find us funny, which we are well aware of, and we are fine with that. We know our truth. It is, it is, it is this sense of knowing the other, right? That can really create an emotional closeness and
Yeah.
an emotional intimacy before maybe you even have the physical intimacy. And so thinking about it even through that kind of idea of like, what are the different styles and layers of intimacy we can
Yeah.
have with people,
Yeah.
right? And how can we use one that we're feeling to allow us to maybe have access to build. So like let's say we start with physical intimacy. Does that help us build a gateway to emotional intimacy? You know, I would always joke that, you know, as a hairstylist, I would put my, you know, walk up and say, "Can I, you know, is it okay if I touch your hair?" Right? And they would say yes, and I would put my hands in their hair and I would start working, you know, through, and that physical barrier had been breached pretty quickly with somebody. And within a half an hour, they were divulging their deepest, darkest secrets. Like, how many times have you been in a stylist chair and you were like, let me tell you everything about me, right?
Hmm.
Because that physical barrier was breached. And all of a sudden, it created this sense of almost emotional intimacy
Yep.
that maybe, and Ashley knows as a PT, kind of probably same thing. And so I really found that it opened people up a lot more quickly when that physical barrier was breached. So it is wild how maybe if you're out there and you're in the world dating and you're being physically intimate with people, do you all of a sudden feel this true or even false sense of emotional intimacy with them because
Yeah.
that physical barrier was breached? And what does
Yeah.
that mean to you then?
Right.
You
Well,
know?
yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up because a lot of times clients will come to me and they have stepped into that physical activity and they're having a hard time understanding if it's actual emotional safety or if it's like
Yes.
perceived emotional safety. Because what happens with sexual activity is we release endorphins, we release oxytocin, which is like the love hormone, and it makes us feel
Bonding. Yep.
warm and fuzzy towards this other person. And that can get misconstrued as
Confusing.
then an actual emotional safety, where having feelings of that connection after sexual activity is let me back up. Well, it's very different than emotional
Yeah.
safety. It can help on the path to emotional safety, but it doesn't always end in emotional safety. It
Very
can
true.
be something just very blanket. That was a really lovely experience that I had with this person. And on the other side of the bubble of this experience is not somebody that I am creating this closeness with.
Oh gosh, Ashley, I love this. Yes, and I want to put a pin in this. So, dear listeners, if we forget to do this, remind us. I want to do a conversation about that oxytocin drop. Make a note. Make a note,
Writing
Ash.
it down. Where am I writing it down at? I got it.
She
I
doesn't
got
have
it.
any paper. Write it on the screen. That we have a conversation about that specifically, right? Like how sexual intimacy, what the hormones that dump in especially a female bodied person's brain,
Mhm.
what that does and how it creates sometimes this false sense of connection that
Mhm.
we then are very confused as to the ghosting culture that we're in.
Mhm.
If we're talking maybe specifically about like heteronormative relationships, but it doesn't, like, this knows no gender, this knows no sexual orientation, right? Like when we have deeply, we know this, people have very, very complicated relationships to sex. And so when you enter and engage with somebody in that, being able to really recognize what is sexual intimacy, what is sexual experience
Mhm.
separately from like the emotional and connection, and how we can help ourselves better understand that. Because I have
Yeah.
so many clients that really, to your point, when you were saying, clients were asking you, how do I differentiate
Mhm.
between what is actually a connection and what this just like healthy sexual experience was, or
Right.
maybe uncomfortable sexual
Right.
experience.
Right. Right. Right.
Or
So,
now I've there's some sort of story in my mind about what's happening that maybe isn't actually happening. But I think that that's an important piece. But today is more of kind of the umbrella conversation too, around how we can maybe even detect or determine what a level of intimacy is with somebody, and then how to kind of follow that thread.
yeah. So, okay, I can't wait for that conversation.
So we'll have that. Stay tuned.
We're gonna do it next time. I'm putting this sticky note.
Okay, good. Ashley will remind me the morning of, remember, we're talking about this.
Um, it's interesting though, when we talk about that, because that's again, it's like sometimes I feel like my clients just need permission to say like, oh, I don't actually like this person outside of sexual experience, right?
Yes.
Like we think, okay, and this goes into like how we are taught to think as a body that doesn't have a penis, of that if we engage in this activity, it's often still not for everybody, but is often still thought of as something for them, the body of the penis. And if we are doing this with them, then that means that we are all in, right? Or we should be all in. And if we're not all in, then we're bad and we're dirty and we're gross, whatever it
Mhm.
is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Slut shaming culture.
yeah. And so having the permission to say, oh, I don't have to tie every ounce of my being to
Mhm.
this kind of activity is a
Mhm.
permission that if you're looking for it, like I just gave it to you, like it is
Mhm.
okay to say, just because you had an experience with somebody doesn't mean that you like them, doesn't mean you have to go on a second date with them or
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
fourth or a fifth date.
There's nothing owed. There's no.
Right. You owe nothing to them. And on the flip side, and this is really important, they owe nothing to you. And
Mhm.
if they decide that they don't want to move forward, it has nothing to do with your worth or anything
Mhm.
that you put out in the world. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, but like, what happens if you are in a relationship, a partner, a romantic partnership with
Mhm.
someone, and you're feeling a lack of intimacy, right?
Yeah.
How do there are many ways that we can build physical intimacy without having sex, and I help people figure this out because
Yeah.
sometimes it's a hug, to be honest. There's not a whole for at least 20 seconds will
Mhm.
release oxytocin. A 6-second kiss,
Mhm.
20-second hug, 6-second kiss. It's like a tongue twister.
Like second.
Um,
Fancy says that.
that can be enough, right?
Yeah.
And this isn't really a conversation to go into like the how do we really break down if
Mhm.
there's like been like a breach of safety, right?
Mhm.
That was just an example that I just gave. That is not the only thing that I tell my clients to do to create a sense of like physical intimacy.
Mhm.
But what happens if like that's not it and it's the emotional intimacy? And I think sometimes, well, it's my belief that if we are in partnership with a romantic relationship for years, we're going to be in many different relationships with that same person. Like
Yep.
we're going to have, yeah, multiple different relationships. And sometimes one of the partners might not be 100%.
Yeah.
And they might not be able to fully meet us where we want to in terms of that like emotional intimacy.
Mhm.
Sometimes that doesn't, and that it okay, it doesn't always mean that then that's just like not the relationship for you and it's over and you're doomed, right? But in those moments where there is a lack of that emotional connection and maybe your partner is just really going through something and they don't have the bandwidth, right?
Mhm.
That is
Mhm.
okay if we don't, or if it's you, how does your partner then find that emotional intimacy, and who do they find it from? And that's where we can go to these other relationships because we're allowing ourselves to be intimate with other people like Sarah Kate and I. We have this very strong emotional connection. I can go to her and talk to her literally about anything, right? And I am not afraid to show up as my authentic self. I'm not afraid for her to give me whatever I'm needing in the moment, whether that's just a listening ear or compassionate support or like a come to Jesus moment where she's like, Ashley, wake the fuck up. No, she's never said
I
that.
would
She's
never
never
say that.
She's
Tough
never
love.
said that. But she will nudge me if I
Yeah.
need to be nudged. She will give me a gentle, like, hey, why don't you think about this? Right? Or why did you notice this? Or have you
Mm,
done this? Right? To remind me of like, hey, okay, I'm on my path and I can do this and I got it. And sometimes we need that. That's the kind of support we need, you know? Um, and Sarah Kate brought that in before we started talking about how we can get intimacy from multiple relationships. And
mm,
sometimes even when we're in a relationship where we want to be getting it from, it might not be the case.
mm. I love you saying that. Because in the sense when you were talking about oof, sorry, flew out of my head, flew back in. My thought is when you were saying sometimes our partners don't have the bandwidth. Sometimes our partners don't have the capacity, right? And this is where that community comes in to play because I, in working with, mental health stuff, when your partner or a parent or a best friend or whomever it is, right, is going through a depression or is in an episode of a depression, or maybe they have a really hard time, um, with anxiety, right? And if you are in relationship to someone, it's going to impact
Mhm.
whomever you are in relationship with in some way, right?
Mhm.
And it's then how we can lovingly support them while we're there. However, you also still need to have support for
Mhm.
you too, right? And so that is where seeking, like Ashley was saying, turning towards your other community where you do have deeply safe, supportive connection, right? Of like, okay, I really need to help my partner and they really need space in this.
Mhm.
So I'm going to lean on, Sarah right now or Ashley right now, our Sarahs or Ashleys in your community, the other 80s babies out there. But like, it's truly a way of kind of recognizing, yes, am I focusing, if you want to be in a relationship of any structure, of any kind, knowing that that person cannot be 100% necessarily all the time
Right.
of the things that you need, emotional, mental, physical, sexual,
Right.
intimacy, right?
Right.
There, and like the different layers even in that, right? Of like how I can find deep emotional intimacy, let's say, with a best friend, also
Mhm.
while I have deep emotional intimacy with my partner, but
Right.
how those two emotional intimacies show up differently.
Yes, exactly. So different.
So different.
So different. And we really set ourselves up for failure when we think that we're going to get every kind of intimacy we need from our romantic partner.
Yeah. Yes.
That's
It
as
boxes them.
right, right. And as humans, that's not how we are designed to be.
Mhm.
Um, and it creates, like she said, that box, it creates this unnecessary and unachievable pressure on the
Yeah.
other person. Um, and and the experience that we have as ourselves, the experience that we have as ourselves with our friends or whoever, and our experience as ourselves with a partner, a romantic partner, are all uniquely different, and they are intended to be uniquely different.
Yeah.
I want my relationship with Sarah Kate to be intimate in the way that works for us. I want my relationship with my partner to be intimate in the way that works for us there. And I
Yep.
need to be willing to explore what that means for both of us, right? Like
Mhm.
whatever relationship I'm talking about, we both
Mhm.
have a say in how the intimacy progresses. It's a
Yeah.
contract between both of us or three of us or
Yeah.
however many people are involved, right? But I
Yeah.
don't want to have the same with
No.
everybody in my life.
No. No. Well, because I also think that if it were the same, then there might be actual, if everybody showed up to you in the same way, there might not be actual growth or
Right.
shift or expansion happening.
Right.
And I think because I've now I'm rounding the corner to 40, having been in long-term friendships and like newer in the last 10 years since I moved to Colorado friendships, right? And like who I was at 30
Mhm.
compared to when, let's say, I met, my best friend at 19, right? And how there's like this gorgeous longevity and this incredible familial intimacy with her compared to maybe more of like this spiritual intimacy with the person and the version that I was when I showed up to these other relationships, and how both are so incredibly important to me,
Yeah.
right? And like having to learn how to evolve in long-term relationship, like that's such an intimate thing.
Hmm.
Like to recognize the person that you love change and continue to like hold that love while the evolution is happening, and you just kind of have to maybe give more space to something compared to meeting someone when you're in a completely new space and it's like, oh well, we haven't had to evolve with each other, we just are these people now. And
Right.
it's so, and like the level of connection you have then is just different, and
Yep.
allowing those pieces of you to be met,
Hmm.
right? And why I love having, multiple intimate connections is because you are such a dynamic person.
Yes.
You have, like Ashley was saying, like she and I have all of these different layers of intimacy between the two of us because we're such dynamic beings.
Hmm.
And like just as much as we don't want to put a person in a box, we don't want to put ourselves
Hmm.
in that box and say, okay, this is enough for me,
Hmm.
and that, to quote Mary Oliver, you have one wild and precious life. Like, and if you are here in this human version of this lifetime,
Hmm.
like, don't you want to feel it all?
Yes.
Don't you want to explore all those parts of yourself?
Yeah. Mm.
Like to feel expansive and feel wide and feel met on
Yeah.
so many different layers. And I think, sometimes I call myself the the grim reaper of relationships in therapy because sometimes when you start to do your work, it illuminates where you are
Yeah.
not being met.
Yeah.
And then it's like, shit, do I have to just kind of, and then this can be partnership, this can be friendship, this can be family. We've talked about like not allowing family to treat us a certain way just because their biology in a session in the past. And it's true. Like sometimes we see where we're not actually as intimate as we want to be and as we could be. And like, then we have to maybe give a little bit more space in whatever relationship that is to be like, no, I want to make room for where I possibly could be met
Yeah.
on a deeper level.
Yeah. And it's so, we always are talking about, coming back to yourself. And in the last episode, we talked a lot about being able to be like authentically like safe within yourself. Um,
Hmm.
and as you like grow through this process, like Sarah Kate was saying, her 19-year-old self is very different than her almost 40-year-old self, but she's allowed herself to find the relationships that really support who she is at her core. And some of them are lifelong friendships, and some of them are people she met maybe even 6 months ago.
Hmm.
And they're all fulfilling her, but she's also learned the ones that naturally just aren't going to give her the fulfillment that she deserves, right? And so being able to discern between those relationships also, if this is a relationship where we're going to grow and we're going to
Hmm.
support each other in that growth, that's part of being close. That's part of building that like trust and comfortableness and all of those words that we can use to describe intimacy. And sometimes then we realize, okay, this actually isn't the person. And our train tracks are no longer parallel with one another. Now somebody's
Hmm.
going off to the right, and that's okay. I'm going to keep moving forward on mine, and they're going to take that right hand turn. And we supported each other. We were in each other's lives for a reason then. And now we're not. And that's not a bad
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah, it gives more permission, like for there to be kind of this compassionate disconnection.
Yeah.
of like, it's okay that this thing that we once had actually doesn't really
Mhm.
support where we're at now.
Right.
And it doesn't mean there's not grief in that. It doesn't mean that's not
Oh,
pain.
for sure.
Right.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that it erases all of the intimacy that you maybe once had with this person. That
Totally.
doesn't get
Yes.
just, like, forgotten and left behind. But it is even in that grief, right? Like, I am obsessed that with the fact that Sarah Kate said, "Don't you wanna feel it all?" Because to my core, if I could say something to every single person on this planet, it would be that. Like, don't you want to feel it all? Like, don't you want the richest experience that you can have when you're on this earth? Like, that's what we're here for. That is the purpose,
Hmm.
you know? And in that
Yeah,
experience, hurt is part of it.
totally. But if we're supported,
Yes.
because
Yes.
yes, like
Yes.
that's, that the
Yeah.
ability to feel something, Ashley, I can feel my sadness and fear because I have Ashley's support.
Mhm.
I can feel, and then it helps bring me back to safety in my own body around it.
Mhm.
Ashley and I can take risks and have challenges because we have support. And I think, again, this is that coming back to yourself to recognize what relationships
Mhm.
make you feel like you can experience everything and be okay because it
Yeah.
reflects to you that you are in fact safe.
Right.
And what are the relationships that maybe don't? They make you feel
Right.
more unstable. They make you feel more worried or concerned or scared, right?
Yeah.
And like you aren't supported, right? And aren't leading you
Exactly.
back to your
Yes.
safety. It's
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
intimacy is such
Yeah.
a practice of reflection too
For
to the
sure.
other.
Yeah. Yeah, and like like you just were talking about, your grief and your hurt is not something that I wish upon anyone,
Mm,
really, or want to feel myself. However, I know that when I am in the depths of my grief, I I can take what
mhm,
it's meant to show me, knowing that, like, I'm not falling through the floor. Right? Knowing that I'm gonna be able
yep,
to stand back up. I might not in that moment have my strength, but I have the connection to somebody who's going to give me some strength for that moment. I
mhm,
know, and sometimes that's another person, sometimes it is just myself, right?
mhm,
But I think that that's one of the coolest things is that, like, the intimacy connection that we create within ourselves and within the people around us, that's where we find
mhm,
us. That's where we find
mhm.
ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So good.
so good.
Well,
What do you got, Sarah Kate?
I
Sarah
got something
Kate's
over
a
here.
little she's
So this is, first of all, I love the deck, but this is the moth card. And I actually, it's, I mean, it's not curious, but it's so interesting to me how this kind of, when we're talking about that dimensionality, right? Of like the incredible experience of being human in some ways and feeling it all, right? But how much we have to feel this. So,
yeah.
clairvoyance. Light enters each beat of her wings, pushing Moth into a realm of luminosity. She is a paradox, one who negotiates inky obscuration yet lives for the light. This valued keeper of elemental balance is the mother of unconditional ethos, untangling programs of the past into sweet resolve and purity of purpose. She entices the soul to reveal the deeper meaning of her own existence,
Mm.
the sum total of all lifetimes lived before. Awash in elucidation, she understands that this embodiment is the most profound of them all. It is the
Mm.
living library of her previous incarnations. Moth whispers for you to trust your knowing, even if others wish to persuade you of different realities. Like Moth, our clairvoyance flies through the night of ignorance and forgetting, headed wholeheartedly toward illumination, toward the light of truth. You will know whether you are experiencing authentic clairvoyance when you become still and allow the information to permeate your entirety, finding that it is validated by coherent agreement of your body, heart, and mind. While the
Mm.
truth may cause you to stretch, which can sometimes be uncomfortable, it always feels like a move towards authentic liberation. When balanced, reliable, intuition based access to truth. When imbalanced, pulled in different directions by conflicting voices. To bring into balance, gravitate toward the thoughts that offer liberation from suffering.
Wow. Okay, so I feel like my new definition of intimacy is gonna be the agreement of what was it? Body, heart, and mind?
Yes.
Agreement.
Yes.
We're in agreement of body, heart, and mind.
Yep. Coherent agreement of body, heart, and mind.
Yeah, there it is.
I love that. And I mean, when we're talking about like, the culmination
Mm-hmm.
of all of these experiences have led to this kind of like sense of like, isn't intimacy really truly of knowing ourselves deeply and knowing other deeply? Like, isn't that
Mm-hmm.
ultimately what, we all long. We're biologically hardwired for connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Safety was community,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I just think like I love that it kind of called in what we were talking about of like a more of a wider idea of what this all means to be deeply connected on multiple different ways and with multiple different people. So you feel a sense like even if you aren't in partnership, you can reach
Mm-hmm.
to others for intimacy in certain ways so
Mm-hmm.
you don't feel untethered or alone,
Yeah.
right? And like just it's just being intentional and mindful about how you're building that community. And also unfortunately that does then look like paying attention to where like you don't need the connection with others as much
Right.
and just really trusting your truth and your own knowing and your own authenticity in that.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
loved it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Intuition. Whew.
Okay.
Well, as always.
So if this is something that, you found helpful, um, share it with others around you. We provide, or we try to provide, conversations where we're just giving like a different way to look at things, you know. We're coming from our own experience and our own work with our clients, and we also understand that like we're privileged because we have each other. Um,
Mhm.
and that's not always the case for people. And if you're in a relationship and you're feeling like it isn't as intimate as you want, we're not saying that you go and blow it up, right? But we are saying that maybe the first relationship that you look to create a little bit more intimacy with is yourself, and explore what that might mean. Um, and we have our list of resources and we are here to help you. That's literally the reason we're doing this. And so you can always reach out,
Yeah.
and we will help you. So, and like always, take care of yourself.
Mhm. Yes.
We'll see ya
Next
next
time.
time. Bye.
Bye.